Wheatley, she's wonderful. She is a druid, and she's very knowledgeable in that area, but also about ley lines. She's written a book about Stonehenge, which I still haven't got my hands on, would love to read. And so she has been, just a shining light out there and bringing wonderful knowledge to everyone.
Great, thank you. Well, hi everyone. It's great to be back at Kerry's conference, and like Kerry said, it's such an amazing energy here this time around. So I hope I'm going to add to that, because I'm going to show you how Stonehenge originally was. I'm going to take you to ancient Egypt, because Kerry and I often go to ancient Egypt. I'm going to show you the earth energies there. Also, my latest research on the megaliths and how where you stand by a megalith can activate your chakras with evidence for that, okay? So I'm going to take you on a bit of a megalithic journey, beginning with Stonehenge. Then I'm going to show you the two different races that constructed Stonehenge as well. So when we look at Stonehenge, this is the version that English Heritage say. We can see here you've got an outer circle of 30, the trilithons in the middle, and these are the small blue stones that came from Wales. Well, that's their version, because when I really started to look to the first accounts of Stonehenge, the first excavations, they didn't describe it like that. And then when English Heritage realized that there was other settings, for example, I'm going to show you a whole stone setting, they buried it in 1928. Then I'm going to show you the stone that the royal family stole, and where they took it, with evidence for that and why as well. And that's why English Heritage, after 10 years of writing for them, have dumped me. Must be doing something right. So also what people said about Stonehenge from the 12th century onwards, those that drank the miracle water were healed. And I'm going to show you the miracle water of Stonehenge. And lots of postcards were sent out after illness. Do you see what I mean? They were all writing that because they realized that it was a healing shrine, which again we'll have a look at later. Now, the excavations were first done by this military man over here, William Hawley, and the stones of Stonehenge were very powerful because, for example, the altar stones, we could say altar stone at the moment, and you may have heard that they think it could have come from Orkney or northeast Scotland now, not Wales. Well, that was red and green, and that one was the one that was stolen. And Atkinson came after this chap here, Colonel Hawley. He did a lot of reconstruction. Then we had Professor Richard Atkinson, and they would follow in what somebody said in 1724 called William Stukeley, who was a Mason. Yeah, and he did revive Druidry. And this is some of their reconstruction here. But Atkinson lied to the world. Not just to the British people, to the entire world. Because in my legacy archive that my late father left me, I've got, manuscripts from master dowsers, geomancers worldwide, including how to look for earth energies by the Kogi Indians of the Andes. They said a different here. I had a witness in that archive that said he was stood by Richard Atkinson at one event of looking for the Henge Bank. Okay, and this is where Atkinson lied. Let's have a look. This is again a model that is shown by English Heritage. It's called the first phase of Stonehenge. We have that beautiful white bank, grass in the middle, and 56 blue stones going around the outside here. Let me just see if that, I can't get that was working a moment. Oh, there it is. These are the blue stones. So that's what they said was that particular phase But my witness, called Tom Gorey, he was so well celebrated at Stonehenge. He worked for them for 25 years and was invited to every single dig that Atkinson went to. And when he was excavating that henge bank, that white bit there, he said to the world, Richard Atkinson, it's just chalk rubble. Just chalk rubble. No technology there then. And what Tom Gorey said was, no, it wasn't like that at all. It was cut out like a pudding bowl, like that, all in one, laser-like. That was the henge, so it's white at the bottom, yeah? Because it's cut out. He described it like a pudding bowl. When I go all around the world, I just come back from ancient America on Wednesday, actually, and I find ochre everywhere. I find ochre by Avebury. And in ancient Egypt, they were using yellow pigments and red pigments, which was ochre ground up. And this is how we see monuments today. They look very grey-like. Yes, that's what we see. And when we look at Stonehenge, we see something very grey, don't we? But back in the day, through finding pigments, that's what it looked like. Yeah, that's the difference between a non-old, 4,500 years of erosion. That's what it looked like. And I find these pigments everywhere. And like I said, I was only in ancient America last week picking up ochre for the group. When I take people to Stonehenge, I pick up ochre. So if we go back to have a look, if we go back to have a look at the Henge monument here with this colour, and we now imagine, for example, all of that white henge bank, I think it was painted. I think these places were colourful. They took you from the ordinary to the extraordinary. That's what I think was going on. Professor Mike Parker Pearson certainly says that he found engravings on a henge bank of concentric circles, spirals, lines, and chevrons. All of those patterns are earth energies. Okay, so I think they were really painting these places. And possibly some of the stones, because again, we're looking at these after 4,500 years orthodox dating. But some of these stones were a slight pinky colour. They weren't silver. And the altar stones that I'll show you, they bejeweled Stonehenge. One of them was 16 feet high, green coloured, flecked with garnet and mica, shining. And then the blue stones were so highly polished, they were smooth to touch. Anyone that comes around Avebury with me, I'll show you a polished stone. And when you feel it, you go, how did they get that so polished? It's lost technology. So we envision now that these are slightly pink coloured. They've got blue colours on the inside with the smaller stones and green stones. And the green stones that they took from the Preseli, because again, they didn't fit into that model, were buried in 1901. Okay, that's a fact. Anything that doesn't fit in, they lose. So again, this is a standard model of Stonehenge. We see that there's the main circle, and then you've got other outliers, and the heel stone. We're probably all familiar with the heel stone, aren't we? Aligned to the midsummer sunrise and the moon. That's not what was excavated. That's there, that it's just a model and it's assumed. It's not what the archaeology tells us. And when we look at the archaeology, we start to see something very spectacular. So, for example, here, this is a single circle. It was a double circle. And it was a lot of technology to do that. Now, I always like to get backups, okay? So I wrote to Mike Parker Pearson, the so-called expert of Stonehenge at this moment in time, from UCL London. And Professor Mike Parker Pearson emailed me, we don't know if the blue stones sockets behind the greater trilithon were a part of the larger Q&R bluestone circle that preceded it, just ignore that bit, which is how I've interpreted them, and I do. And they were basically saying, he's saying here, English heritage are wrong. He's saying that he doesn't agree with that, and I don't, and I'm going to show you what we do agree with. That's the model of Stonehenge. This is what is actually there. We've got an extra trilithon set in here, buried. Yep, I'll show you where. We've got this altar stone stolen by the royal family here, and so it's not a horseshoe shape. It was kind of going round more in a circular shape with a double concentric stone circle here with an avenue here. You would enter through this bit here, through a blue stone avenue, and they're the green stones, all buried, 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 because it didn't fit the model. So is there any evidence for that? Well, yeah, you've only got to look for an archaeological report on Stonehenge. Let's have a look at Atkinson's, and he shows you that avenue. Can you see it there, the 4 stones? This is the avenue here on the axis line where I showed you those 4 stones were. So we know that when you've got all of the evidence from the archaeologists, do you still say it looked like they say it looks like? It's incredibly wrong of them to do this. I'm going to show you the placement of the hidden trilithon. The great thing about my work as well is I like to keep up with the latest technology. And the latest technology is called LiDAR. Have we heard of LiDAR? Oh yeah, it goes through sand, it goes through trees, and you can use that with what's called satellite imagery and find everything that's buried in the past. And I qualified last year, and I've already found a Henge monument for English heritage. So I can use LiDAR to see below the ground. And I think in the future, people should be using LiDAR for alleged UFO crash sites and things like that, because anything that impacts the Earth, whether it's a socket hole for a stone, a crash, will have an impact. And I know what crash sites look like because I studied World War II in my LiDAR as well. So I can look at all of that. Now we're going to go on to the King of England. James I of England, James VI of Scotland. What a character. Now, if that's their bloodline stock, whoa, be afraid, be very afraid. Now, this king was quite deformed, actually. He had a much larger tongue, and he couldn't stand on his body weight for long, okay? So his legs didn't support his body weight. He was a very flamboyant character because he married Queen Anne of Denmark, okay, and had children with them. But he had a lover called the dashingly handsome Duke of Buckingham, George Villiers. Okay, so there are 2 suspects at the moment, James I and his lover, okay, George Villiers. George Villiers was an occultist. His mother used to do blood rituals for the king, and I'll mention those blood rituals to you. So this is the public face of King James I. Oh, I'm going to write the Bible in English for you all. Sick of Latin. James I version is still the best-selling book in the world. Okay, so he wrote the Bible out as well, despite the fact that he was having blood rituals and a lot going on. And unbeknown to the British public, he wrote demonology as well. And so I was saying how you can summon up demons and all sorts, really. So he had the public face, then he had his occult side to him as well. And this part really annoys me, he started the witch trial frenzy. Yeah, because as Queen Anne was coming across from Denmark, a tempest came, a storm brewed. Well, it is the North Sea, King. And his ship nearly went down, and he blamed the witches of Berwick, who were poor women. That's who he blamed. So he's a very strange character, he really is. And Stonehenge, as I showed earlier, had perfect symmetry, okay? It was those 6 trilithons, that beautiful concentric stone circle, two of them, perfect symmetry with 2 altar stones, because in his report, he was the first person ever to dig at Stonehenge, was the royal family, okay, with George Villiers, because he was a young chap that could actually dig. He would be falling over by now because he can't support his own weight. He's very sickly, James I. they found a socket hole, and they described the socket hole, and then they described the stones to you, the altar stones. English Heritage is in denial at the moment that there were two. So they knew that there was one light altar stone at the centre of Stonehenge and one dark one, okay? And this is now our real culprit. This is George Villiers, the Duke. In fact, it was said in that era, 1624, that he had more power than the king himself, George Villiers, yeah? He was the main person that everybody went to. And there's a setting at Stonehenge, which was leaning, that got put up right in 1901 by Colonel Hawley. But can you see that leaning stone? George Villiers went to the landowner and said, "Can I buy that stone from you? I want to take it to London." And the landowner went, "What? No, this is Stonehenge, it's staying here." So George Villiers couldn't get his own way, and he wanted that for his occult practices. And his occult practices dealt in stone and blood, okay, for the king, and different kind of directives. But what we've got here is a second altar stone. And they even tell us where they took it, yeah? This is all documented. And this is what was said from Aubrey, which was an archaeologist in 1666, and many others. But this is what they wrote. In the innermost part of the cell, they mean the centre of Stonehenge, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones was the architect to James I. He drew Stonehenge with 6 trilithons, and I've got the tattoo on my arm with 6 trilithons because he is right. So Mr. Jones, he was an architect in London. All of those beautiful buildings near Buckingham Palace, he designed them. Inigo Jones. So he says here, in the innermost part of the cell, Mr. Jones observed a stone, which is now gone, appearing not much above the surface of the earth and lying towards the east, 4 feet broad and 16 feet long. And this is the second altar stone. The second altar stone surfaced in John Aubrey's Monumenta Britannica. He is an antiquarian around about the 17th century. Aubrey was told of the second altar stone, so everybody's talking about it. And he was even told of its fate by the rector of Bishopston. So presumably the man of the cloth is telling us the truth when he says, Philip, Earl of Pembroke, Lord Chamberlain to King Charles I, successor of James I, did say that an altar stone was found in the middle of the area here, and it was carried away to St. James. Now, that's interpreted as St. James's Palace. Why? Because Buckingham Palace hadn't been built yet. So they took the stone to St. James's Palace, which was the royal residence. And even in 1930 was the last time there's St. James's Palace there where it got carted away to. And that's where we think that it is. And in 1930, like I briefly said, they were trying to track it down, the top archaeologists in Wiltshire. You know, if I find the second altar stone, I'm going to have my name in lights. So they were all trying to track down the second altar stone. And they got letters, door closed, whoops, no stone here exists. So I wrote to them recently with all the documentation like this and said, where's the second altar stone? No stone here exists. Because where James was getting more ill, the Villiers, the occultists, wanted him to lie on that stone because they have immense healing power, as I'm going to show you in a moment. And they can kind of almost resurrect. And like I'm going to show you, where you can literally stand by a stone will change your consciousness and open chakras that Kerry was talking about earlier. At Avebury, you could fit 2,000 people into that sacred site. Now, Kerry was saying about all of your auras here today and energy. Well, imagine 2,000 in one place, switching on. These ancient sites can activate our kundalini, activate our consciousness, and change us. Because when you go to an ancient site, you are in an altered state of consciousness. You just need to know where to stand sometimes to get even more benefit that you're getting already. That's the power of place. The power of place. Never underestimate that. And Stonehenge is cordoned off to the public because it can transform you in an instant. It's not gentle like Avery. It's alchemic, like the pyramids. We're going to have a look at the pyramids later. So I think the second altar stone was definitely stolen by the royal family. Facebook brought me down. Kerry was on about videos being brought down. I just mentioned about the royal family because everybody's talking about the altar stone. Couldn't even post for about 2 weeks. And then Facebook got in touch with me and said, we think you're trying to get too many likes. I thought, isn't that the point of Facebook? But anyway, and they eventually, when I peeled against it, they let me back on. But you can't mention anything with the royal family, seriously. Now, Professor Atkinson's, he had to now cover up the fact that he knew an altar stone had been stolen. This is in the 1950s and 60s, so what's the cover-up story? Well, he said that the stone at Stonehenge, it's quite unusual, I'll show you in a minute, made a makeshift second altar stone. He was covering up for the royal family. And this is the cover story. Can you see that's got a bit of a groove in it, that stone? You may just make out it's got a bit of a groove on the inside. Yeah? Can we see that? The buried stone in the other sector had a tongue coming out of it that looked like it could fit into that stone. And that's what Atkinson said. The reason why there's a second socket hole at Stonehenge by the altar stone is because that stone was a makeshift one. Well, that stone stands behind the altar stone. And I don't think it's ever, LiDAR is not saying that stone has been moved, so I think that was the cover story from the get-go. But that stone is very powerful if you stand by it, if you go to Stonehenge. Who's been to private access at Stonehenge here? Twice, Kerry, yep. Well, yes, I mean, I would really recommend it. It's quite expensive, and if you need a guide, I'm available. I love Stonehenge. I've been there God knows how many times. We've just done a film at Stonehenge that is coming out, actually, which was a bit of fun. So, stone. This is sarsen stone, are the large stones at Stonehenge. The softer, smaller ones are called bluestone, and the altar stone may have come from Orkney or northeast Aberdeenshire. On Facebook, they're all saying Orkney, but in all probability, it's somewhere in Scotland, but it may or may not be Orkney. So this is where, they were gathering stones and bringing them to that one place, and they were gathering really special stones, and they were programming the stones. I'm going to introduce you now to somebody called Dr. Don Robbins. Has anyone heard of him? No, because he went missing as soon as he released this information about stone programming. He worked for the Dragon Project. The Dragon Project was in the 1970s and 80s, run by Paul Devereux and others, looking into the anomalous sides of stone circles. So if you imagine you've got a lot of experts, and Dr. Don Robbins was an archaeologist, and he was also a chemist as well, very widely respected in the ancient world. And this is Dr. Don Robbins here. He's taking Geiger counter readings from a stone circle in Wales, and he realized that through lots of experiments that if I hold a stone now, and I held a stone for about 5 minutes, and then I put it on that table, and I get a pendulum or a dowsing rod, it's going to go counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, registering my female energy. Then if a man comes along and holds the stone, it would go clockwise. And they called that a bionic charging of stones. But they realized it was transient. It would go, it would leave after 24 hours. Then Dr. Robbins looked into the fact, what if you hammer something? Can that affect the crystal lattice of the stone itself? Yeah, and he did a lot of experiments, and yes, it was affecting the lattice. Now, what Don Robbins realized was there's no difference between a standing stone's lattice and a semiconductor from California. They have the same lattice structure, so theoretically they could hold on to memory. And this is where Don Robbins was going. And they called it, if you bang a stone, it's a petron charge. They came out with all of these terminologies, and the bigger the stone, the bigger the mass, the bigger the petron charge, they called Lithon power. So we know about stone programming like that. And Dr. Don Robbins was looking into all of the mythologies that have been written about stones from about the 12th century onwards, which I'll come to in a moment. So as a dowser and a second generation master dowser, I thought, I wonder who programmed Stonehenge. Were they males? Were they females? Were they both? So I was looking for what's called that Petron charge, and this is what I got. I got female charge and males, and it's always been known that where it's got at the bottom, male-shaped stone, that's called a phallic stone, and the female stone are always rounder. You see this repeated around the world instantly. That's at Stonehenge, you see it at Avebury. So these are all the different charges that you can put into stone, just what we call a bionic charge. But then Don Robbins was looking, and my late father was involved in this as well. Why is it that all of the myths that English Heritage have left out of their guide, but why are all the myths saying a god occupied Stonehenge, manifested? And the manifestation of this god Apollo, the god of healing, was said in all ancient manuscripts. The god Apollo leaves the temple of Delphi in Greece and arrives at Stonehenge for the winter solstice, and we doth see him. So they're all saying in all of these old stories that something was manifesting there. And to give them their due, Professor Tim DeVille and the late Geoffrey Wainwright, for instance, they went out and said, yes, we think this is a healing temple that was occupied by a god. Every single archaeologist literally slashed them out of the water. But they know that these can be affected. So we think what was going on, looking at the ancient myths of Stonehenge with the two altar stones, that they were programmed. And I'm going to read to you how it came down to us about what was going on at Stonehenge. And this goes back to the 15th century. Okay, and again, these are very difficult to find because it's not in the mainstream, and it's certainly not on Wikipedia. So it mustn't be true. So this is the stone programming. And this is from one of the early antiquarians called John Wood. John Wood designed that beautiful crescent shape at Bath City. Have we heard of the crescent shape at Bath City? That was designed by him. So he's an intelligent man. He excavated Stonehenge, and he said some of those images delivered oracles and thereby showed signs of life. Others in the human and other shapes moved with the slightest touch, and some cast their eyes about as though they observed the actions of all that approached them. So he's saying this is about oracles. Yeah, one stone is about the oracle. Then another antiquarian said, and this is about the other altar stone, Apollo is honoured among them above all other gods, and the inhabitants of Britain are looked upon as priests of Apollo after a manner, since daily they praise this god continuously in song and honour of him. Stonehenge was occupied by him. So I think that these altar stones could be used for oracles and manifestations of the god. That's where Don Robbins said you can get a fleeting image come out of a stone. And he was just about to break through to the archaeological community, and he went missing. I spoke to an author that I know, and I was saying, I'm going to track down Don Robbins. He went, good luck then. He's completely off all internet except for a few pictures and his books. But he was last seen in Russia, apparently, and then just completely went missing. And it's always the same. How many times have we heard that? You get someone breaking through to tell you that your Stonehenge could have manifested a fleeting god that was programmed into it, possibly, and then they go missing. Yeah? I'm surprised we're all still here. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you the magical properties of Stonehenge now, because it was a magical place. I'm going to show you where it was buried as well. And again, this is I've chosen an older picture for you, but the LiDAR does prove it. Okay, I could tell you with the LiDAR where anything buried in that landscape now, yeah? And I'm pretty good. I don't leave any stone unturned, excuse a pun. But this is the sixth trilithon. It's at the top towards the north on this diagram, and this is where it was buried. But before we see that, these are the six trilithons drawn by Inigo Jones. He knew that there were six there through what's called sacred geometry, okay? And he literally drew that for the world to see before, sadly, it was buried. So in 1928, it's believed that it was buried, and there it is. Yeah, it's buried right in plain sight. You even walk over it when you go into Stonehenge. This is what they do. They literally hide things in plain sight so that you think, oh, it's not there. It's just a story. Oh, it's just untrue. But again, if you look to the archaeological reports, just like they tell you they took the stone to St. James's Palace, they tell you that there's an anomaly buried at Stonehenge, and it's a stone setting, and it was a trilithon. Well, I think that should be re-excavated and put back up. That's my thoughts about it. But I've entered the King of England and his lover. Now I'm going to introduce you to what the government did to Stonehenge, okay? And they literally defaced it. It's no surprise there. So now we're going to have the secrets of the trilithons. Why, go to all this trouble of programming every single stone at Stonehenge with a hammer? Yeah, they didn't do that at Avebury, they didn't do that at Castlereagh, they did that at Stonehenge. Stonehenge stands alone because it was manifest in different things all of the time. And going back to the 12th century, we had a great guy, Geoffrey of Monmouth, he was called. He was of the church. He had lots of Welsh manuscripts going back hundreds of years. So even to the 800 AD and 80 AD, he had all of these huge manuscripts at his disposal because he was a member of the church. So it's the 12th century, and it's Geoffrey of Monmouth. And he said that at Stonehenge, for in these stones is a mystery and a healing virtue against many ailments, for they washed the stones and poured the water into baths, whereby those who were sick were cured. For not a stone is there that is wanting in virtue or leechcraft. That's because they put leeches on you back in the day. So he's saying that it's really, really healing. And another antiquarian said, no stone at Stonehenge does not have healing power. Yeah, so it's a very powerful place. So how? I think this report here from the 12th century, that probably came centuries before, is a memory of what was really going on at Stonehenge. Okay, and when we have a look at the power of the trilithons, what this could have done for the British nation, for healing many people, is very shocking. So I'm going to introduce you to trilithon 51 and 52. They're right there. They're in situ. That means they've never fallen down and been re-erected and set in concrete by Colonel Hawley or Professor Richard Atkinson. It's in situ. It stood for all of that time. And at Stonehenge, they're not in soil. They're in solid chalk bedrock. Yeah, so that's why it always leaves a gap for LiDAR. Do you see what I mean? You make socket holes in the chalk, which is very powerful. Those two stones there are down 2 feet. That's the engineering skill to keep that atop after Orthodox dating 4,500 years. Only 2 feet in the ground. And one stone was only 18 inches into the ground because they could literally make a kind of concrete that kept them in situ for all of that time. I mean, this is the legacy of the ancestors. Going back to my legacy archive with the curator of Stonehenge, as I mentioned, for more than 25 years, Tom Gorey, I started in lockdown, which I didn't do lockdown that well. I'm sure none of you did. I just put a suit on, a business suit, tied my hair back, and went to Paddington Station with a pulley long trolley and a rucksack, and nobody asked me what I was doing. I was going to go see a friend. I thought, and it was really good. You could get first class for nothing. It was good. So this is the kind of side of the stone, okay? Now, Tom Gorey, when I was reading through lockdown, all the different reports, he kept saying one strange thing about this stone. And bear in mind, he was the curator for more than 25 years and widely respected. And he described it on the outer face. It had a deep hole, 4 inches, 10 centimeters wide, that extended down into the stone for just over 2 feet, so I could put my hand, do you see what I mean, into the stone. But the strange thing was, he said, whenever it's a drought, whenever it's raining, whenever it's windy, any weather condition, that hole magically fills up with water. Yeah, so you have water being manifested through that stone. And he says, even in a drought, it produced water. So he's telling us that this is water. And what was happening then, we're going back now to about the 1920s, pre-war, people were queuing to be healed from the healing water. And I'm going to show you it now. And it's also got what's called water erosion runoff on it. So you can even see that. So that's the hole, yeah. And this is where the water has run off. Can you see? Where it's filled up and run off. It's called water erosion to an archaeologist. And I've studied at Oxford archaeology for 3 years with Lisa Brown. And so we know that's water erosion. So anyway, imagine this. They said it was good for the falling sickness. What was the falling sickness in the 1920s? Epilepsy. It could cure asthma. It could cure eczema. People were placing this water onto their bodies. So what did the Ministry of Works do? That's before English Heritage, before the National Trust, or as we say at Avebury, the National Mistrust. They decided, the Ministry of Works, so they can't have all of this healing going on at Stonehenge. It's just an astronomical calendar after all. So they plugged it up with concrete and plastic. Yeah, so I could take you there today and show you the concrete and plastic. Yeah. Now, a water diviner, I come from a family of esoteric water diviners, was called in. Could somehow the underground water be filling up that hole? That was ruled out. Yeah. Nobody knew, but what we do know about Stonehenge is the nearest spring is 2.5 miles away at West Amesbury. So that was one of the amazing healing aspects of Stonehenge. The next triathlon I'm going to take you to is opposite this one. It's called triathlon number 59 and 60. They just give numbers to everything. I call it the spine stone, and for good reason. Now, today, this stone lies recumbent. It was pushed down in antiquity. Can you see those 2 ridges on that stone? Professor Richard Atkinson and all said it's a mistake. That's a mistake. Everything in the ancient world had meaning. Nothing was by chance, yeah? And I've been to sites all over the world. And this is a trick. When you see that stone and the security guard, don't touch the stones, don't do this, don't do that. And what I show people is the heat coming off of these ridges, which I call a spine stone, okay? And so one day I had a group and we were feeling it like this. It was on film. I filmed it with a temperature gauge, actually, to prove it. And I'm going like this, and the security guard comes over and goes, don't touch the stones. I said, I'm not. I'm just feeling the heat emissions. You could see his eyes go in the air like that. Geez, who've we got here? And I said, give it a go. Why don't you just give it a go? So he took his gloves off. It was a very cold morning. And then he put his hand across and he felt the heat. And he went, oh my God, can I follow you around? So the next minute, and then whenever I go in the mornings, I know Wendy from English Heritage, and they all say, oh, we're so sick of English Heritage narrative. Can we follow you around, Maria? So I get all the security coming and following me. The interesting thing about this spine stone is it's at human height. Those spines don't go to the top of the stone. Do you see what I mean? They only go to human height. Avebury has a spine stone. Our Beltany Tops in Ireland has a spine stone. And I could list loads, yeah. And if you put your spine against a spine stone, you feel an instant interaction with the megalithic energy going into your chakra system. yeah, and activating it. And like I say, there's a beautiful one at Avebury where they always have a bit of a groove by them. So you activate your chakra system. It's really good for backache. And then you go into the groove to kind of absorb the energy. Do you see what I mean? And then you can feel the heat for yourselves. I say go there and feel it for yourself. You can't miss that stone, incidentally, because it stands next to one particular stone that has concrete in it. Yeah? Stone number 60, a sin of the Ministry of Works again. Why? I live in Marlborough, and Mike Pitts is a very famous Stonehenge archaeologist, and he's never YouTubed me. He thinks, oh yes, that's Maria, she knows Lisa Brown. I'm always name dropping to get in museums. Did I tell you I know Lisa Brown? Like that. And he said, oh, you know Lisa Brown, she's the world's expert in pottery. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm doing a bit of study about Stonehenge. Can you tell me about stone number 60, why it got concreted in? Bear in mind, I've read what the curator already said. And what the curator, Tom Gorey, said was, Professor Richard Atkinson saw that stone slightly leaning, like that. And he said, no, that's wrong. It must be perpendicular. It cannot bow to sacred space, as an esoteric geomancer would say. So with chain and crane, he pulled that stone forward and it cracked. Must have been an oh shit moment then. And then the workmen said they heard it thud make this really strange sound emission, so they've all buggered off now. They don't want to be around that. And then they concreted it in. That's why. And why? Why did it break? Because it had an area, and Mike Pitts gave me the photo. It's in my book, The Secret History of Stonehenge. They cut a section out of that stone so you could sit inside of that stone. And this is Mike Pitts, and like I say, he's the top archaeologist. He said, Maria, you could fit 2 in, 3 at a push. Yeah, so I could be inside that trilithon next to the spine stone. Yeah. So what's going on there? Again, they can't understand these sides, so they deface them, yeah, which I think is wrong. And like I said, you know, I do know the archaeologists, and they are very helpful with me. Because they really want to get another story out. It's English heritage and the government that aren't allowing this to be released. So we're in the trilithons now. I've shown you some of the trilithons, one that produced water, one that was healing, and one you could even sit inside. I've got a great old photograph of, I think it's 2 people and a dog inside of the trilithon. So now I'm going to show you another trilithon and another cover-up job. When we look for carvings at ancient sites, they're very rare, yeah? They're very rare. And Stonehenge, one of the trilithons, has a deliberately cut out rectangular shape. It's no longer there. You can't see it because their policy is, let the lichen grow. So it's going all kind of furry and moss-like. Let the lichen grow. Don't touch the lichen. You know, no. And it's covered it up, so you can't see this. But again, through my legacy archive, I had the original photographs of this trilithon and can show you that it had this is bit being pushed down. Can you see the carved area on that massively hard stone? To do that, it doesn't look much, but sarsen is second in strength to diamond. Yeah, and granite, so it doesn't look much. Well, anyway, I remember reading a report about Stonehenge saying that in the 1500s, under the rule of Henry VIII, geez, our kings, Henry VIII. Anyway, in that era, they said that they found something at Stonehenge, and they're reporting it now. They were really good at documenting things in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. And they said, yes, we found a strange metal, and we don't know what that metal is. Could it be lead betwixt with tin? No. Could it be tin? No. And they said, and this is where kind of little Roswell memory might come in, when I doth bend it, it went back. Well, that sounds a bit like Roswell, doesn't it? And they said it was carved exquisitely. with hieroglyphs, what they said were hieroglyphs. So it had some unknown language on it, yeah? And they said, oh, it actually matches where it could have been put on a stone there. So that could have contained the metal plates they were all talking about that maybe came from another world, maybe was a strange metal from this world. I don't know, I can't see it, because guess what? It's gone missing. Yeah, everything of worth and merit we find goes missing, okay? So what I think was going on, I think that did contain the symbols. I think it contained a relationship maybe between races, maybe between different humans. Like I say, I don't know. But what I do know is when you put all of the facts together about Stonehenge, which I have done, then we get a different Stonehenge. We get a different Stonehenge and a use of it. And they like the mantra, keep going. Oh, it's a calendar. No mystery there. No. The sun comes up, and that's it. Yeah? Do you really think the ancients went to all of that trouble to see a pretty sunrise? No, because what Don Robbins discovered about sunrise is this. When the sun comes up over the horizon line or sets, we see a lot of red light, don't we? Red or orange light. Now, in that light, you have, for example, radio waves, microwaves, all of this energy, not just the light, yeah? And what Don Robbins realized was that the pressure of the movement of that red light against the lattice structure of the stone can literally push through it. It's a microwave. The wave energy stays the same, but it becomes pressure. And push that pressure through that stone, and it becomes sound, infrasound. And I think I'm going to show you the ear placements of the ancients could hear that. So he says the reason why they're aligned to the sunrise is because of ultrasound, okay, which also can be healing as well. So I'm going to show you the people of the past, of the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, and how their ear placements were very different. They look different to you and I. And I was talking to Jackie just a moment ago about how I discovered about 10 years ago now the longest elongated skull in the British Isles, which I call a hyper-elongated skull, which I'll show you. And the amazing thing was I found this by turning dowsing on its head. You know when people pendulum dowse? Who pendulum douses here? Yeah? And you ask your pendulum a question and you get a yes or no answer, yeah? Simply put, that's it. I thought, well, what if I change it all around and I say to the landscape, what do you want me to find, not what I want to find? And I was just, I was having an audit for the taxman. Some person reported me to the taxman and said that I had, all of these earnings. So I was going through an audit at the time. So I was trying to get my mind off a nervous breakdown. You feel guilty, even though I had an accountant do it. I was feeling guilty. And so in my dowsing, turning everything around, it led me to her long barrow, and my journey began in Cambridge with viewing this skull. And it's very, very long. Ours ends around here. Yep, that's where yours would end. They're all just in boxes. Again, in lockdown, I thought, well, I've discovered the elongated skulls a while ago. What about the rest of their body? Maybe I should start looking at all of the reports on how tall they were. Were there any femur bones left? I knew there was a lot of femur bones in long barrows because sometimes they would make a skeleton in the fetal position and place it in a long barrow, in a Neolithic long barrow, going back 5,500 years ago. Or sometimes they just have the skull and the long bone, a bit like pirates, a flag. That's what they felt was very important. So sometimes you just have those as deposits. So building up report after report after report, this shape came about, where their heads were elongated, but 1/10 of their body. My head, if you're an artist, if you're modeling clothes, your head is said to be 1/8 of your body. So even though they had these strange elongated skulls, their faces were much, much smaller. I measured one male face that big. Yeah. So we're not dealing with giants, we're dealing with giants and another race besides. And they were around 5 feet, the men, women about 4 feet 9. And that was their shape. So they would have looked very unusual. You would have done a double take. And to prove all of this, I went, did I tell you I knew Lisa Brown? Did I tell you? Yes, I know Lisa Brown. So I got into a curator and we were measuring them all to prove that they were quite short and unusual looking. And again, all femur bones, measurements, all femur bones from the Neolithic were 17 inches or less. So that means their height at the most would be 5'4". It's what anthropologists and the police do if they find a femur bone. So even though some of the graves are called the Giant's Grave near Pusey, they had these short people in. The giants came later. Yeah, and then they tried to, they eradicated the elongated skulled people. Here's another one based on a drawing from Yorkshire, and very elongated indeed. Now, when I spoke to a doctor, Dr. Caroline, I won't say her second name, I said each anthropological report is saying the same thing about their ear placement. Can I just give it to you verbatim and you tell me what's going on? Because I'm not a doctor. What would I know? But I knew in my intuition something was awry, so to speak. And she said, this is wrong. She said, this is wrong. And I said, but what if it was right? Because they're all saying this in the Victorian era, right up to the 1930s. They haven't got a middle bone in their ear. They're kind of missing something in their ear. And she said, well, they'd hear different frequencies, possibly. And not only that, in the reports I read, their ears were set further back. Yeah, so I think the stories of the Fae, I believe in the Fae for sure, but I think some of the stories of the Fae are based on these people because their ears would have looked different. They may have even, been Fae-like to the giants. What we've been spoon-fed as just fairy stories. They're just fairy stories about giants. They're just fairy stories about pixies. I think they have their roots in the ancient past. I don't have time to go into it now, but have we here heard of Lloyd Pye and the Star Child? I think I found the Star Child at Stonehenge. Yeah, and its description is literally out of this world. And the excavators of that found it. It freaked them out so much that they stopped in their track, put all the dirt back, and they're still there in the land because it frightened them so much. So now I think we've got a kind of different race almost that is akin to the fairy stories. And it's these people that put up huge monuments like this. This is called the Rudstone monolith. It's in a Christian churchyard, literally by a church, and these are the tricks that they tend to do with very powerful stones. Can you see it's being capped with lead? That was done by the Ministry of Works again, because it can influence, as we're going to see, your consciousness. That stone can influence the land for miles with its what we call a torsion field. And if you don't know what a torsion field is, it's like the aura of a sacred site. And with Richard Hoagland for radio shows, we've measured it. They go out about 5 miles. And Richard and I have been looking into stone circles on the moon, which I'm going to show you later, because they're everywhere. So this is where I think they came from, literally. All of these stories are all about these people, and we're kind of lingering memories of them. But there were 2 types of elongated skulled people. Now, you have naturally elongated skulls, and the elite, the priesthood, the rulers maybe, they extended theirs with cranial deformation. So they were naturally long, but some were extended. Do you see what I mean? That happened in Paracas. I've spoken to Brian Forrester, that some of you may know. He deals with the Paracas elongated skulls. So this is a natural elongated skull here, still very long, and that is falling apart, so they had to put that there. And that's in the vaults of Salisbury Museum. Did I tell you I knew Lisa Brown? Got in there on that one. I was thinking, oh God, I hope they don't Google my name. So we have the two types, the lesser elongated, and they're tiny. When you see their skulls, I mentioned this to the curator, who was really nice actually, and I said, it's the size of a child's skull. And where they're so used to seeing these things, they don't really recognize what's going on. And he just went, oh yeah, I never thought about it like that. Because their bones are so dense. That femur bone, you probably can't appreciate it in that photograph, but it seems much bigger than that skull. Do you see what I mean? It's almost like they would have been very different in their body movements even. And it kept saying in reports that they had very strong muscle as if they'd been moving heavy objects. So I think they made stones lighter. I don't have time to go into that today, but they were still moving them. And when we have a look at another skull, that's a naturally kind of long skull, no cranial deformation at all. And you can easily tell cranial deformation because it leaves two scars here, yeah, where you put a board against your kind of skull. But this shows you a really narrow skull here, and that's just, each one of those represents an inch. Yeah, so we can see that they were tiny and they were narrow, and they're hidden away. Yeah, not one of these skulls is on public display because they'd have to explain a bit of a different story than the one that we're used to hearing. And again, we can see that this is a natural one compared to the first one I showed you. And it's all falling apart, and they kind of glue them back together. You know, it's quite astonishing. I mean, you know, if I was handling human remains, which I have, then I don't think I'd do a big globby bit like that. But anyway, that's what they do. Now, in the Bronze Age, you had a race of very tall people, and their femur bones have been measured. So I did a, whoops, that changed by itself. Let's go back. Yeah, sure. Well, you see, there could well be more differences. I'm going with the reports that I got when I was studying at Oxford. Just before lockdown, they all thought I was such a studious student. I had all sticks, and I was just downloading as much as I could, knowing that lockdown was coming. So I got those reports from Oxford. Cambridge might have done different studies. Edinburgh may have done different studies. Do you see what I mean? So this isn't the full story and is open to more research for sure. So this is a comparison with a Neolithic small skull compared to a much, much taller Bronze Age person that people like other researchers call the giants. So they would have looked really small. And this is, again, I think the fairy tales come from this. And these are all done to the reports from Oxford that I was saying. So the round-skulled people and the elongated had this kind of war, if you will, because a lot of the skulls from Stonehenge showed signs of being murdered, clubbed like that. So when we put them side by side, which flashed up earlier, here we have a round skull next to a long skull, and you can see clearly that they do look very different, don't they? And that was at a place called Bellisnap. Has anyone been to Bellisnap? It's amazing, isn't it? You know the false entrance at Bellisnap? That's where those two skulls were placed, looking at everybody that enters that monument as if they're the guardians of place. So that's really interesting. But they definitely didn't get on. That's the point that I'm making. They really did not get on. So a lot of them were murdered. From Bellisnap, these long-skulled people were all slaughtered. You know, it wasn't touchy-touchy New Age feely in the Neolithic. There was these races that did not get on at all. Yeah? So what I'm going to talk about now is some of the energies of Egypt, because Kerry and I obviously go to Egypt. Kerry announced that earlier in the first part of next year. And who's been to Egypt? Quite a lot of you. Who wants to come with Kerry and I? There you go. You got to come, because we have an amazing guide with us as well, and we have private access to the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, sunrise in between the Sphinx's paws. What's not to like? So I'm going to show you some different types of earth energy now, because that's my forte. And before I do that, there's something happening in the skies that's going to be quite amazing, that only happens once every 80 years. So maybe just in our lifetime alone, because we're going to have to wait another 80 years, unless we get a really nice form of anti-aging and not that ghastly blood stuff. Unless we have that, we're not going to see it. But Stonehenge was aligned to this particular constellation, which I discovered. And just to show you how it was in that pudding bowl shape, that's what it would have looked like. That isn't me going mad with a Crayola. Well, it is on Photoshop. But that's just to illustrate they could have been coloured. Obviously not like that. I'm not artistic to do anything with. But it would have been all white with 56 blue stones. Stonehenge, phase 1. That's what that's called. And at midnight, exactly on that stroke of midnight, at the centre of Stonehenge, at the spring equinox, there would have been a constellation above it. That constellation is called Corona Borealis. And Corona Borealis, to the ancient Iron Age people, the Druids, Corona Borealis was the goddess of reincarnation. She was the one that would look into your soul. And if you were good, and if you had, a poet, a magician, they would all go to the pagan heaven. And the pagan heaven was Corona Borealis. So I think Stonehenge, as I mentioned to Dolores Cannon, I worked with Dolores Cannon for about 8 years, leading tours across England and France with the wonderful Dolores. And she agrees. We think it's about reincarnation as much as it's about death to the archaeologists. But, so at this moment in time, Corona Borealis is about to experience a nova. Yeah, and a nova is when something explodes. Now, what if, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Robert Schoch and his work in ancient Egypt, but he claims that if a star bursts like a nova or a massive plasma event, then it changes our consciousness. Yeah, and we're coming up to that. When is it going to happen? An astronomer, rather, can't say, oh, it's going to happen at 8 o'clock on the 25th. They can give you months, and they say, now, in this month. That is going to happen. So keep your eyes out for Corona Borealis. Tune into that energy explosion. Tune into the highest potential of yours, or release any negative karma. Do you see what I mean? However it is. But this event is coming. And that was just to prove that the brightest star, called Alphecca or Gemma, as it's known, is at the center of Stonehenge in its heyday. Yeah, so I think it was more about the stars as well. So really keep a think of that. I remember having a conversation with Dolores where we can actually release some of our karma. Yeah, so it's something to think of. Go with your own heart. Don't go with what somebody... We only know it's September, Carrie. We don't know any date. They can't kind of pinpoint a date, unfortunately. So what I do is I just kind of go out every night. Yeah, it's going to be an event. So if they think it's coming, you'll get some astronomer saying about it. And it's going to be a sight to behold. Yeah, and also it's going to be the night of the high moon pretty soon. But you know what? I love lays, I love earth energies, I love dowsing them, I love interacting with them. And for my book, I've just been chatting to some gentlemen over here. I don't have time today, but I've done 3 years of agricultural experiments where you can charge seeds above earth energy and grow them in harmony with earth energy, and you get twice stronger plants that grow really straight. So we can kick ass with Monsanto soon. That's for sure. In the meantime, I'm going to take you to the Giza Plateau, okay? This is a huge lay that I doused in Abydos a couple of years ago with Kerry, and I got a computer program to check my work, and this is the main line. It goes through the Great Pyramids, it goes through Luxor, for example, and this is Abydos. At Oxford, they say Abydos. No, Abydos. I'm studying there. Hope he doesn't Google my name. And this is the line coming down here. But we notice that Hathor's temple and Amarna and all of these sites, they're just off that line. Because in a ley system, you have a line and then an earth current, male and female, entwine in it. Do you see what I mean? So this is why you have a corridor each side. So in England, this was discovered by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst in the 1980s. They discovered a ley line has two earth currents entwined in it. One is male and one is female. That's a ley system that is much, much more powerful than a ley line, for example. And I'll show you what I discovered in Egypt in a moment. Now, some of those ley lines and earth currents, the ones Hamish found at Avebury and Glastonbury, those two earth currents he called Mary and Michael, they go around the world. So it was Robert Kuhn that discovered Mary and Michael go through Ayers Rock, Uluru. In Australia, they go through Lake Titicaca. They go round the world in perpetual motion. Such is their power and energy flow. In Egypt, something different is happening, and it's happening inside of the Great Pyramid. And we call them, as dowsers, convergence and emergence points. Okay, so if we just anchor those two words, they're a geomantic term, meaning a convergence point is where earth energy converges together and goes into the ground. We call it a node. Or an emergence point is where it comes out of the ground, cobra-like, and then flows back in the ground. Can you see what I mean? Some comes out and some comes in. That's a convergence and emergence point. So when we enter the Great Pyramid, and Kerry and I get private access, and we get about an hour in each one, don't we, Kerry? Yeah, at least an hour in the King's Chamber. It's phenomenal. And we do sound toning and experience the energy. So we see the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber therein with those so-called air shafts. But what's actually happening in terms of earth energy here is you've got an emergence point of feminine energy coming out of the ground in the Queen's Chamber. And I doused the exact spot last time I was there. And in the King's Chamber, emergence of male energy flowing around that line. And that's why when you look to all the pyramids, like the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, and numerous others, they're always off the line, but they're on the earth currents, just like in the UK and across Europe, for example. So these are ley systems. And this is Abydos. And it's very, very powerful temple. It is absolutely exquisite. I will call it artwork, because it is a work of art. You see these massive, massive depictions of the gods, of hieroglyphs, of cartouches. You feel about that big when you go around looking at it all. It's really astonishing. And what I realized was Egypt was different to the UK because of one simple fact. It doesn't have two earth currents, it has three. And I discovered this at Abydos, because, getting it wrong again. We got the ley line that links it right the way to the pyramid, as computer programs attest. Then I realized you have a male current, and it hit they call them chapels, but they're rooms, sacred rooms here, yeah? But they're called chapels. And the Osiris current goes to the Osiris chamber. The female current went to Isis, so I called her Isis. And the another male current went to the Horus chamber. So I called that Isis, Osiris, and Horus, because all of the earth energies underpin these sites. They underpin them. Now I'm going to show you a slightly different earth energy system that underpins Stonehenge. And if you know Stonehenge, then these are the earth currents. They set every single aspect of Stonehenge. The circular bit is a site of a large aquifer. You have an aquifer beneath the Great Pyramid and all of these lines. So I think that this is a long lost avenue. That's the avenue that you would have walked that's been found with LiDAR and aerial shots long before LiDAR. These are tracks leading to barrows. And so this is, I conclude, is a second avenue that is long lost. And thankfully, the tunnel didn't get the go-ahead. Yay! So yay, won that one. So what I'm emphasizing here is see how everything is underpinned with energy in the ancient world. And this was done in 1932 by the master dowser Guy Underwood. And then because I'm a really good water diviner, I looked into it and did some water divining around that area as well. And the water table is sinking, by the way. You keep having to bore down, and it's almost like it's retracting because of the poisons. Yeah? It's something we need to look out for. What I'm going to show you now is the base of the pyramid, energetically speaking. Okay? So if we have a square or rectangular shape here, okay, what we're seeing is that's the actual kind of pyramidal shape. It should be a square, but it's drawn as a rectangle. And then it gives off an energy field that you can douse. Positive, 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 negative, 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 masculine and feminine. And you can douse that. I'm going to show you how this one here affects your consciousness, and then this one, how it affects your consciousness. And it's absolutely extraordinary. And to the ancients, they said there were 7 wonders of the ancient world, didn't they? And they said, for example, Mercury, the magic square of Mercury rules the pyramid. Whereas, for example, Solomon's temple was Saturn, the magic square of Saturn. It was ruled by that. Go on to Wikipedia. They don't say Solomon's temple. They say the lighthouse of Alexandria was the 7th wonder. It wasn't. All occultists going back to the 17th century said it was Solomon's temple. So these are energy fields that we can interact with. So imagine that it's just releasing energy out into the landscape. Do you see what I mean? These positive and negative fields. And, you know, I don't want people to just believe me and be credulous and nod ahead. Oh, yeah, that's okay then, Maria. And so I went to Avebury out of my way to show us how a standing stone releases similar energy. And what if we put in really big copper probes? Could we get the frequencies of this? Thankfully, I did that about 6 years ago and came to the conclusions because you can't put anything into the old surface level now. I went right down to the old surface level, which is about 2 meters. It was a hell of a job getting copper that deep. It really was. So this is the heel stone at Stonehenge, and this is the shape of the megalithic energy that is released by that stone. That stone is here, and it's releasing these. They're called concentric shells, okay? So we can see it creates a circular energy field, yeah? I have a geomancer's eye and an archaeologist's eye. Can you see round the heel stone the remnants of a ditch and bank? Can you see that? When it's a hot day, you can see what's happened in the landscape. Well, that's showing you that that stone, and that had an enclosure, a ditch and a bank, is here. And why did the ancients do that? Like I said, everything was for a reason. Nothing was by chance. So we measured that first energy field. And it came out at 133 hertz, which is the frequency of deep meditation. So the first energy zone that the priesthood or the people, whatever, were reaching was it puts you into deep meditation. I love taking kids around Avebury and Stonehenge because, do you know what? They don't have any care whether they're right or wrong. I'm just going to have fun. And so I put them into these energy zones and said, you tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on. How do you feel? And time and again, they were voices a little bit softer, still excited, but voice instantly changed. And that was the first thing that we noticed. I also work with people with Parkinson's. Yeah, and I did some experiments with Lucy Pringle. She's quite a well-known crop circle researcher. And I said, if people put their hands on particular parts of the stone, I think they can help Parkinson's. And so we took handwriting of people before and handwriting of people after, and guess what? Their writing improved. They could hold and feel a pen. Yeah, so I think these standing stones are definitely healing. And then if you move out to that second concentric stone circle, you get the note of G around 192, or more accurately, 195.99. And the control, we always do a control away, slightly away from it, so we know if it's an anomalous signal, was 634. And that's activating your throat chakra. That's the hertz frequency of your throat chakra to speak your truth and power. Yeah, so these places can transform us. And could you imagine with a school of, I mean, I'm dyslexic, if you have people with stutters and stammers and you just put them in that energy zone, yeah, it would save a fortune on the NHS. So I really do feel that these are powerful, okay? I'm just going to recap on the 7 wonders of the ancient world here before I've got about 10 minutes, and I want to take some questions in a moment. These are the so-called magic squares of antiquity, and they all add up to the same number. I'll show you one in a moment. But just imagine that all of these ancient wonders are associated to these magical mathematical squares that you can, if you're interested, Google in your own time. And we're going to have a look at those. So let's say you've got massive, this is a massive global grid system called the Curry Net. Just imagine it's surrounded on Mother Earth. It's quite toxic, actually. But now I'm going to show you a much smaller one, a magic square. Yeah, and these magic squares can be found throughout the 7 wonders, Stonehenge, Avebury, all over the place. This is a magic square to Saturn. In mythology, it's said to the ancient Chinese, a turtle climbed out of the river Low, and on its back were all of these numbers. If I add them up that way, that way, that way, it always comes to number 15. If I add them all up, it comes to 45. So all of those squares, they add up to the same number all of the time, and they're used in feng shui. That's the magic square. And so if you're southeast of your corner, if you're broke in your southeast corner, well, that's your wealth corner. Put some money there. And so all of the true feng shui masters use what they call lo shu. It's very, very powerful, and they manifest in the earth. Okay, they can come up, not perfect squares, and they certainly don't have numbers on them, but if you imagine a square like that, that's what we call them, a satin square. And we've measured them, for example. I've got anomalies over all points at Avebury, and that's saying that it's coming out of the earth at 48.9 hertz. Now that is really accurate, 48.9. And if you look to how that frequency affects your brains, it's for quick decisions. Yeah, and where do you find them? In lodges, in stately homes, and so that would be a great area for an office, for example. And at Stonehenge itself, they incorporated the magic square. And this magic square, incidentally, is incorporated into the largest Masonic lodge in Washington, where the window is designed, it's called 6x6 magic. That way adds up to 111, 111, 111, all of them together, 666. Yeah? And it's the number of solar power. And yeah, I know it's familiar with the number of the beast, But that's how Masons would look at this. And there's one very benign one at Stonehenge, but in magical terms. Yeah, if I want to block off Mercury retrograde, who gets, oh, Mercury retrograde, everything's going to go wrong, all that sort of thing. I don't know why people go on about that, because see that magic square, go onto Google, print it out, then get what's called its seal, and you'll see them on Google, and you press the seal over it, and it blocks any retrograde motion. It's the first rule of magic with magic squares. So we can do this all the time. I'm going to end with my latest work with Richard C. Hoagland. He does a radio show called The Other Side of Midnight. I got to be up very early for Richard tomorrow, 4:30. And this is the research that we've been doing. I thought, would it be interesting, when I showed you that line going down through the Great Pyramid, what if we project that entire ley system onto the moon? Would we get anything on the line where the pyramids is? And what we got was the huge line, because it's in a more of a bright colour yellow, is the Giza line on the moon. At that latitude. And then it was discovered after Apollo 11, I think it was, that there was this anomalous stone circle, yeah, on the moon. Yeah, and Richard went on to Coast to talk about it in various other shows. It's got a central feature. So Richard said to me, "Why are you good at stone circles? This is the diameter, about 30 feet across. Can you get any stone circles that match it, Maria?" I got 15, yeah, all to the same size, near enough to what they projected was the size of the stones there as well. So we think that is a deliberately designed stone circle on the moon, and there's others on Mars and probably places like Europa and rock planets. So we think there's an exchange of lunar culture coming down to Earth as well. Otherwise, that is a coincidence. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's a fact. Well, you've been a great audience. We've got 5 minutes, and I'm sure you want to rush off to lunch anyway. But if anyone's got a question, you, sir? Yes, I've got the secret history of Stonehenge on my table out the back, and I'll be there just after lunch. And a gentleman over here had a question.
Hi, Maria. Thanks for bringing your magic and giving us a treat today, as usual.
Thank you.
Bless you. My question is, with regard to the plate that went missing off the stone, could it be bismuth, do you think?
Could it be?
Bismuth.
I honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. I think, what I hope I do is inspire people to go on and find out even more, because the research doesn't end here. It just begins. Yeah, and you can add your own understanding and research onto that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir?
Is that background picture, is that the same picture? Is that just a zoom in of the moon surface?
No, this is a site in Ireland, and that's the one on the moon. Yeah.
Maria, did you go to look at Adam's calendar at all?
No, I haven't been to South Africa yet.
Okay, but you could, Michael Tellinger, you know?
Yes, yeah, I took him around Stonehenge.
Right, so he would be able to show you where they might, it looks like some of the circles there.
Oh, absolutely. I think it doesn't stop in England or Ireland. I really don't. I think, these examples are worldwide. Thanks for that, Kerry. I come from a kind of system of master dowsers. Rory comes from the British Society of Dowsers. So I've been taught by people that have studied in China. So I'm very different in the sense that I get guided by what the earth wants, not what I want. So in my school of thought, you never move an earth energy line, you heal it, whereas the BSD and other dowsing societies advocate moving lines. The Kogi Indians wouldn't do that. Hopi don't do that, nor do the Zuni. So I'd like to think I add a very feminine touch that only does what the earth wants. Yeah, and so I would never move lines like Rory does. But I respect all dowsers for their different contributions that they add to the cauldron of wisdom.
Do you not think some of your illustrations look like starships?
Do my...
Illustrations of Stonehenge or mappings?
Oh yes, I mean that analogy has been made a long time ago, actually, because there's two lays that were discovered by an author of UFOs in Reality called Roy Dutton, that where the crossing point of the most powerful laser is Stonehenge, and they're corridors that are used by craft. That's what his work was done, and he logged something like 2,000. He logged on those lines at Stonehenge. So yes, there's a correlation.
Those are ley lines. Have you, presumably we're looking at a spherical model of the Earth here, have you tried laying it out on a flat Earth model, like the UN sort of map of the Earth?
No, I haven't done that. We use what's called Beth and Hagen's model of lays, which are the Platonian solids, you know, like a tetrahedron and that, and if you put them all together, they wrap around the world. So that's the ley system we're using for that. And the earth currents that entwine it, that's the most powerful. But that's a very interesting point, and one that I haven't done, but you certainly triggered my inspiration to look into that, so thank you.
Maria, I'm aware that a kindly rich person re-erected a lot of stones at Avebury in the last century, but I believe he died before he could complete the project. So with this advancement, where you can now see more clearly what's under the ground, do you know how many stones there may still be latent that haven't been taken away in the Middle Ages for use in building projects?
That's right, it was Alexander Keeler in the 1920s and 30s. Avebury is more restored than Stonehenge. The great thing is, with the advancement of technology, it couldn't catch up to what Keeler was doing in the 1920s. He got an old-fashioned sounding bar, went like that on the ground, and where he heard it go duff, 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 he knew it was a buried stone, and where it was louder, he knew it wasn't there. So geophys comes along, and LiDAR, they look at Keeler's old map, and it matches. There's 16 buried stones in the outer sector and a whole avenue at the bottom of Avebury Truslow. Loads.
Amazing. Somebody with a lot of money has got to come along and sort something out, because that would just be...
You can't, it's UNESCO heritage site, which means, unfortunately, even if you found the Ark of the Covenant, you couldn't put it back.
One kind of thing, what would be your feelings? Would you prefer somebody to do that project or not now?
I think if it's sensitively done, and it's done with good motive, good intent, with, Carrie was talking about love earlier, you know, real love and real passion, then I'd like to see Stonehenge Triathlon restored.
Thank you.
Could you expand on your earlier point about standing in certain positions around the stones?
Yeah.
You just touched on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The concentric shells, as they're called technically speaking. Okay, you've got your back against the stone. Yeah. Have a look to how high the stone is. Let's say one is 4 feet, just for argument's sake. The first concentric shell is going to be 4 feet away because it's the height of the stone. So some of them can be quite a long way away. But if you're really sensitive, then you will feel it. But here's the thing. Just stand by a stone with a rod in search position, pointing straight ahead, parallel to the ground. Tune into the concentric shells, walk forward, and when it hits that first shell, it will go like that. Keep your rod there, don't move it. Walk slowly ahead of you. When it finds the next one, it will do that. So it's doing this. Do you see what I mean? In and out. And it's so easy and so powerful. All you have to do is set your intent into that which you douse, and you'll be able to find those healing areas.
What's under the Great Pyramid? Is it the Horse of Renti?
Oh, wow. If only I knew that one. Yeah, no, I've done some absent dowsing for different, objects, and like I've helped out on the moon. And I'm kind of, when I go back to Egypt next time, that's when I find that when I'm in that energy zone, I get more accurate results. So who knows what I'm going to find? Or we're going to find, whoever comes with us. Absolutely, I'm megalithic Maria. I've been interacting with stone circles. I'm 60 now, and I started with my father when I was about 8. I've been to most stone circles in the British Isles, and I love Castlereagh, Longmeg, and Swinside, which is one of the most complete. You're from Swinside? Wow, whoops. Well, that's absolutely amazing, because that's the most complete stone circle in England. Oh, I love them. I love them all. I've been all around, all over the place. Okay, thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.